Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story. Never turn around. I live on the top floor of a 5-story apartment building in a moderately big city. My apartment has 1 bedroom and a fairly large living room with big windows out towards the street and the opposing building. That building has a small parking lot up front, so it is not directly across from mine, which I kind of like because of the privacy. Being a night owl, I like to sit up late with my laptop sometimes. I peek out the window at the building across, looking for lit windows, and wondering if anyone else out there is doing the graveyard shift. Last night, I wish I hadn't. I usually sit with my laptop facing the windows. For the last couple of nights I had, in the corner of my eye, been seeing a sparsely lit window in the building across, and in it I saw some sort of movement last night. My curiosity got the best of me, so I put my computer down and went over to the window to check it out. Surely enough, you could see someone waving, but just barely. The window was dimly lit, but you could definitely see some movement. I thought about it for a second and went to get a pair of binoculars. After some searching, I found a pair and went back to the window, putting them to my eyes. I located the window and got a better look at what was in it. It appeared to be a person, lit up by a candle. I couldn't make out the person's face, but he was waving at me, apparently, because after I had locked onto him with the binoculars, he stopped waving for a second and then pointed at me. I felt a chill go down my spine. This was fucking creepy. He pointed at me and then made a circling motion with his finger. He kept doing this over and over until I realized he was signaling for me to turn around. I reacted out of instinct and quickly turned around, as if I really were expecting something to lurk behind me. Nothing was there but darkness, obviously, so I chuckled to myself and turned back to the window, with my binoculars only to find it empty, except for the candle slowly fading out. I jumped back and dropped the binoculars on the floor, the noise of the impact spooking me even more. What the fuck? I thought to myself as I went back to my computer. I put on some music to calm me down and surfed around a bit more until I looked at the time and realized it was about to get light out. I put my computer down and made my way through a small hallway that led to my bathroom. I didn't have any lights on, but as I approached the bathroom I noticed a flickering light underneath the door. My body froze even if I did forget to turn off the bathroom light. A light bulb could not produce that kind of lighting. I slowly walked up to the door, took a deep breath, and lightly pushed the door open. I stepped inside and, to my horror, I found a candle sitting in the sink, revealing a message scribbled on the mirror. NEVRTU RNAROUND, credited to Zoso. The second story, elevator incident. I was in Taiwan 1 year when I was younger, and had traveled to a busy night market. These are popular gatherings that usually operate in the evening. Nearby I spotted a sign for a net cafe in a 5-6-story tall building. Thinking I'd fire off some quick emails, I walked in the dark. Small entrance of the building. The aging building appeared to not be well maintained, but that was not out of the ordinary in Taiwan. The entrance just had a dark hallway that led to a small elevator. I pressed the elevator call button and entered. The elevator was uncharacteristically new compared to the building, but I didn't think much of it like some Chinese buildings. When I looked at the floor numbers, I noticed There wasn't a fourth floor. It's considered bad luck since for sounds like death, so it just read 1 2 3 5 6, which was normal. I looked for the floor the net cafe was at, 6th floor, and pressed the button. The elevator lurched into action quietly and began to ascend. When it stopped, I figured it was my floor, so I instinctively began to step out. Right before stepping out, however, the sight outside the elevator stopped me. It was pitch black, only lit by the light in the elevator. It looked like it hasn't been occupied for decades. Random pieces of furniture covered with white cloth or similar were scattered around. This was a small building, so I could see pretty much the entire floor from the elevator. Thinking I must have gotten the wrong floor, I checked the light that indicates which floor you're on. Strangely, there was nothing. None of the indicators were on. It just remained blank. But the floor button to the net cafe was still lit, so I know I haven't gotten there yet. I stood with my eyes just scanning the bizarre floor for a couple of seconds. That's when I noticed a figure moving in the distance of the floor. It was not very visible, but I could make out what looks like a person dressed in some kind of gown, moving slowly towards the elevator. I was thoroughly creeped out, so I started pressing the closer button. As soon as I pressed it, the elevator light flickered off. I am this close to pissing my pants, and it's actually kind of freaking me out thinking back to it. The lights flickered back under a second, and the door closed. The elevator jolted back to life. A few moments later it opened again to the net cafe. I am beyond relieved at this point. I walked out immediately and sat down at a computer. After gathering my wits a bit, I walked over to the cashier's desk and told them what I saw. The girl working there listened, and her face turned a bit ashen, so I asked her if she heard of similar occurrences. She told me that she's never experienced it, but some co-workers and occasional customers have brought it up. Basically, the building has 6 floors, and the 4th floor had a history. Apparently the floor used to be a hair salon of sorts, until one of the employees killed herself there for some reason. She slit her wrists over the hair wash station and died. The store continued operations despite stories of weird appearances. When customers got their hair rinsed, the water would look a little red, like the customer was bleeding. Little things like that. And a couple people reported seeing someone's figure walking away in the mirror. Naturally, the business closed down a few months later. The building owner tried to re-rent the place out, but never had any luck. Most businesses are quite superstitious, and no one wanted to rent the 4th floor after someone had died in it, even at a very cheap price. Finally, after dropping the price to nearly nothing, a stationery supplies store wanted to rent the renovations of the floor. However, several accidents would happen. Tools would end up in strange places. A mirror from the previous business shattered when no one was near it. And finally, a worker had his hand jammed between the elevator doors when it closed on him unexpectedly. The worker the business left, and the building owner finally gave up and shut down the floor. He then had the elevator company come in to replace the panel so that the elevator could not go to the 4th floor. Let me repeat that the elevator was programmed to never go to the 4th floor. It doesn't even have a button. But for some reason, sometimes when people take the elevator, it would go to the 4th floor and the doors would open, and some, like myself, would see a figure walking around in the dark. The 3rd story Seriously, a man and woman walked out of the bank, hand in hand. This might be a normal thing for anyone. Maybe even you, but not for her. The man made a typical throwaway remark about their lunch plans. Under usual circumstances, this would just be interpreted as a feeble attempt to incite light-hearted Dennis into the conversation, but not for her. With a quick, agile movement, the woman, his wife, picked up a slab of concrete by the sidewalk and, with great aim, hit two doves perched on a low-hanging branch. They fell, like two pathetic white balloons, as soon as they hit the ground. His wife beat them to a pulp. She could see that they were still breathing, and her husband knew that he fucked up again. Some passerby began to stare openly at the horrible sight of two bashed birds. Linda, her husband, yelled, "Stop it." "I thought we were going to kill two birds with one stone," she replied, in a voice of unnatural calm. Her face gazed up at him from the ground, stoic and rigid, like some dread mask. She had a certain, well, mental illness is a bit of a euphemism at best. Just say she had a disability, a serious and rare one. Linda could not understand the difference between jokes and imperatives. She took every figure of speech she heard seriously, and was often compelled to make whatever it was into an actuality. Her husband recalled one point when she nearly pushed him out the window, when, in light of the recent resignation of his business partner, he remarked that he was in fact flying solo. Linda wasn't always dangerous, though sometimes he'd go home only to find her giggling like a little girl at the sight of milk on the floor, or maybe even staring out windows during rainy evenings to see whether any cats and her dogs were to be found falling from the sky. But then came the times when she would get harmful. Only last month, the pediatrician living in the apartment next to theirs got pelted with apples and other fruits. Poor woman, and nearly tripped down the stairs this other time, an event which still scared him up to now. She shoved in his hands a bit of her bloody scalp, saying it was a piece of her mind. She had to wear a bonnet whenever she had to get out of the house after that. In spite of all this strange and violent behavior, he still loved his wife very much and could not bear to send her away to a mental hospital. His mistake. He became very careful around what she would see or hear coming from anybody since the episode with the birds. Much to his joy, a year and a half passed without much incident, and their firstborn child was soon to come. It was good, since the coming of a baby took their minds off whatever financial problems they had. He was away when it happened. After he heard the child was born, he rushed back home. As soon as he stepped through that door, he knew something was wrong. His wife was calling him from the kitchen. In her arms was the son he could never know. In the light of their kitchen, laying on the table, were the remains of the baby. Their baby. Its mouth was stretched open to such a degree that it split open the underside of its jaws. It reminded him of a tearing cloth, the seams not made of fabric, but of flesh. What little blood the baby had to spare was everywhere, in response to his child's grotesquely expanded mouth. His father's jaw fell open in surprise and terror and disgust, threatening to do the same. A scream tried to come out, but it did not. Forcibly thrust into the gaping hole that was a baby's mouth was his wife's forearm. She seemed to be trying to claw something out of it. As soon as his wife spotted him, she turned in his direction, the bloody baby still stuck on her arm. "You have to help me. The doctor said he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth.